Today in our 2007 GMC Sierra 1500, we'll be installing the Firestone Sport-Rite air helper springs for the rear axle. This is part number F2320. Now the benefits of having an airbag system installed on your vehicle is for when you have a heavy load in the bed, you can help level it out. If you're towing a heavy trailer that has a high tongue weight, you can help level it out so you don't have that trailer sag going on in your back bumper. And if you have a heavy load that's off to one side of the bed, you can actually fill them individually because we have individual nozzles here, so you can fill the left side airbag independently from the right side airbag. And we'll go ahead and demonstrate that right now. I'm gonna fill the passenger side up. And now that we have our passenger side filled, we'll fill the driver's side. The airbag system will also help reduce permanent strain on your rear suspension. It'll help improve tire wear, and it will also help improve stability and handling while carrying a heavy load. Okay, as you can see, our Firestone kit here comes with our 2 airbags, our frame mounting brackets, various installation hardware, our spacers, our Airline tubing, our bag of mounting hardware. Our instructions come in this nice vinyl envelope with a sticker. Then we have our no drill inflation valve mounting kit, which you can mount to your back bumper or your trailer hitch so you don't have to drill any holes. Just secures these zip ties, and you'll have your 2 fittings here where you can individually air up each airbag. All right, as you can see, we got our GMC Sierra set up over here. Let's get a couple measurements with a vehicle with a completely stock suspension and unloaded, so we know where we're sitting at with no weight on it. Then we'll put some weight in it and see where our measurements change to. Starting in the back, the most noticeable spot, we'll measure here from the ground to the center of our wheel up to our wheel well here. Looking about 34 inches right now. Let's go to the front and get the same measurement. About 33, so we're at 33 in the front and 34 in the back. Let's go put some weight in it and see what our measurements change to. We're sitting about 32.5 inches at the same measurement that we did before, so we dropped about 1.5 inches. Now we'll go to the front and measure the same spot. We're sitting about 33.25, so it only went up about 1/4 inch, just the rear sagged more than the front pulled up. Now with our airbags installed and our weight back in the truck, we'll take some measurements here to see where we're at. We're sitting about 34.25 in the rear, so it's right about where the stock was, with 40 pounds of air in the airbags. Let's go check the front out. The front, we're about 33.25, so it's exactly the same basically as where it was when it was stock and unloaded. So that'll keep your headlights pointing at the ground when you're driving down the road versus up in the trees, and it'll help keep your truck riding like there wasn't a low back there. Now if our vehicle's raised in the air by the rear axle, so the tires are off the ground and the suspension's loaded, we can start removing our wheels. Do that, take a 22mm socket and remove the center cap first to gain access to the lug nuts. Set it aside and we'll repeat the process on the other side. All right, the first thing we're gonna do is remove this factory bump stop right here. However, the instructions list the bolt is inside of it. On this particular model, it's not, so you can ignore the part of the instructions there. There's a 15mm nut on the inside of the frame rail, just on top of the bump stop, and you might be better off coming from underneath the vehicle. Okay, so we'll go here, inside the frame rail, in this pocket. Remove the nut. Now we need to remove the stud from the bump stop and bend this tab down. So if we're bump stopping a vise, now we'll just tap it out the rest of the way. Grab a stud that we have laying around, punch it through. We need to bend this tab down though, remember? Okay, so if our tab bent down or broken off in this case, we can reinstall our bump stop onto our bracket. Now we'll take our provided bolt in the kit and run it through the bottom, then we'll put our lock washer on top and our nut. So we'll take our bolt, our lock washer, drop it through our bump stop like so. Pull it on through, making sure our lock washer's still on it. Take our plate, like so. Then we'll grab our flat washer and our nut that we're going to use. Now here's a little tech tip for you. Just grab an extension, put it inside the bump stop like so to hold the bolt through. Because we're going to be tightening it from the top, and the way the bump stop's designed, you can't get a socket in there to tighten the bolt easily. You just got to rely upon tightening the nut. We'll take our spacer plate like so. Now we'll reinstall it onto our frame. Put our flat washer over the bolt, take our nut, and install it. Okay, now that we've got it started, we can tighten it down. Okay, with that tight, we can move on to the next step. Now we'll take one of our airbags in our top frame bracket, set it on top, lining up the 3 holes. Take 2 of our bolts here that have the provided Loctite already on them. Get them started by hand. We can tighten those down with a 9/16 socket. There is no torque spec listed in the instructions for these, so just snug them down and give them a little bit of an extra turn. You should never have a problem with them. Okay. Now we need to grab our Airline fitting and thread it in. Note the thread seal tape on it. So we'll thread it in until it touches, and then we'll tighten it a 1/2 turn, like so. Now we can assemble our plate for the bottom. First, you grab this U-bolt, drop it on down like so. We'll grab this spacer plate here, sit it on top of our airbag like so. Grab our bottom bracket, sit it on top, and we'll thread our other bolt with the Loctite on. Just finger tight, so we need to make some adjustments to this later as far as alignment. We just want it together for the time being. Just like that. We can move it around, slide it either direction. We want it just like that, so we can align things to where they need to go. Now we can grab our airbag assembly and raise it into position. This hook here will go over the factory U-bolt, which holds the leaf springs to the rear axle. And this part here has a nice notch cut out in it where it sits on top of the leaf springs. We'll take this plate here that goes underneath the leaf spring with the elongated hole going towards the center of the vehicle. Push it up into position. Take our lock nuts, install them into place. We can tighten them down. Now we'll torque them to the specified amount found in the instructions. Now we need to mark our holes that we're going to drill in the frame to secure our top bracket. First, we're going to make a couple measurements. We want to have between 7¼ inches to 9 inches between the bottom of our air spring where it sits on this plate to the top here on our upper frame bracket. And right now we're at 8¼ on the front, about 8 in the rear. You want to go as high up on the frame as you can and still be within these measurements. So I'm just going to pull up the airbag a little bit, make sure we're still within those measurements. Our paint marker, we'll mark the center of our holes. We only use the 2 that are directly below each other. With that marked, we can drill our holes now. Now, starting with a small drill bit that we'll use as a pilot hole, we'll drill our first hole and then we'll slowly work our way up using larger drill bits before we end in our final 3/8 size drill bit. Now in the front, we are drilling through 2 layers of metal, so it takes a little while. The back ones is only 1 layer of frame, so it won't take quite as long. So make sure you drill slow and steady speed while applying pressure. Now you can always take some long zip ties and wrap them through the bottom hole of the airbag frame bracket and secure it to a leaf spring to hold it down out of the way. Do that on both sides while we drill our holes. Be a little bit easier because it won't be in our way. Okay, now it's out of our way. We can start working up to our final hole size. Before we drill out our back holes, we want to make sure our pilot holes here for the rear of our upper bracket are right somewhat in the middle of these, the gussets here that help support our bump stop. You don't want to drill through the actual gussets on either side. Just as long as you're in the middle of them, you're fine, in which case we are. With our holes enlarged using several different sizes of drill bits, we can finish it up over our final size of 3/8. Perfect. Now we can cut our zip ties that we used to help secure our airbag out of the way. Now we'll take our 3/8 bolts and we'll insert them into the back holes. Then we'll go on the back side of the frame. These are large flat washers and our 3/8 flange nuts. We'll put them on the 2 bolts here. Put our flat washers on. We can leave them loose right now because we need to move the bracket up and down a little bit to get the front holes in. So we'll just get them started like that for the time being. Now we'll take our handle nuts here, inserting through this hole in the frame. We'll go to the back where the holes are and take our other 3/8 bolts and install them. You'll need to put a small little bend in the handle nut, just like that, so it'll sit flush. I'll just turn the nut by hand a little bit, make sure it gets started straight. Pull that down out of the way a little bit so we can get access to the other one. Come into position. Take our 3/8 bolt. Hopefully it starts pretty straight. Now we can tighten these down and torque them to spec. Okay, you actually need to use a deep well 9/16 socket on the back end with a ratchet, just because there's not enough room to hold the nut in position with the way the frame's set up. So we'll do that. Take another 9/16. Okay, with them started, we can now torque them to spec. Now we can find the torque specs listed in the instruction manual. You're going to wedge your ratchet against something like the bed of the truck. You don't have to hold it in place while you torque it to spec. Now the front ones, we don't need to put any wrench there or anything to hold it in place because the handle nuts will bottom out here in the frame channel. So we can just tighten them down. Now we can remove the excess part of the handle nuts since everything's torqued to spec. To do that, just take a pair of side cutters, hold it in position, and work it back and forth. And it'll cut through it real easily. Just like that. All right, now these bolts are tightened. We need to make sure our airbag's centered on this plate, which just so happens it already is. And then we need to snug up the bottom bolt here. Using a 9/16 ratcheting wrench. just like so. Now that we have the passenger side done, we can go ahead and do the same for the driver's side. With the driver's side done, we can mount our bracket here that we're going to use to hook our airline fittings into. I'm going to do it like this so it sits at a downward angle, so it's really easy to put a tire pressure gauge on there to check the air pressure or to put air in. If you did it like this, it'd be kind of difficult with the bumper in the way. Take the included zip ties, insert them through. Once you have it secured and square on the frame of the hitch, we can snug up the zip ties the rest of the way, and we can cut off the excess. Now we'll take our fill fitting that has the quick disconnect here for where the airline tubing goes into. Unscrew the nut. Once the nut's unscrewed, we'll insert a flat washer on one end, and we'll grab another flat washer. Going over to the vehicle, we'll insert the flat washer, like so, and resecure the nut. We'll do the same for the other fitting. With the nuts started, we can tighten the nuts down a little bit to make sure they're not going to go anywhere. With them secure, we can take the included caps with valve core movers, thread them on, just so we don't lose them. Now we'll take our airline tubing, grabbing both ends of it, and we will pull it until we find the middle. Should be right about there. Take an airline tubing cover, available on our website, part number F9009. Well, now we'll have two equal sections to work with. So we'll take our airbag fitting here. It's got a nice swivel on it, so it was easy to work with. We'll insert the airline and push it in until it stops. Just like so. We'll pull back on it and make sure it's tight. See this silver part here that's moving in and out when I pull on the airline? It's a quick disconnect. If you want to remove the airline, you just push on it here and you can pull it right out. Just like so. But right now, let's make sure it's installed and in position. Now we can route our airline to the rear of the vehicle, going over the exhaust heat shield like so. So going back over the heat shield, we'll pull the airline as far as we can go. Go over this bracket here where the spare tire carrier is supposed to be. Go over this frame rail here in the back. We can zip tie our hose right here to this wiring harness that goes down to the trailer connector just to secure it into place using one of the included zip ties. You don't need to go too tight on it, otherwise you could risk crushing the airline. You just want to hold it securely in place. Take our airline tubing cutter and we'll cut off the excess, just like so. And these are the same style fittings that are on the airbag itself. So we'll just push it in, push down until it's secure. And we'll cut the excess off of our zip tie so we don't see it. Now we can do the same thing for the other airbag. We'll cut off our excess again. I like making sure you have about an inch extra just so it has some flexibility in it if you need to move stuff around at any point in time. And we will secure the excess up to a wiring harness that is behind the bumper. This will just help keep it from rubbing into anything. With our installation complete, we can fill the system up with some air and check for any leaks. Now with about 50 pounds of air put in our airbag on the driver's side, we'll spray our fittings with some soapy water, making sure nothing bubbles. And if nothing bubbles, we're good. I don't see any bubbles there. We need to make sure we check the fitting on the back of the vehicle too. Nothing coming out there. We also need to double check the valve core or the airline where you actually put the air into the system. And that's good there too. We'll do the same on the passenger side. And now we'll put 50 pounds of air in the passenger side. These do fill up very quickly, so you need to make sure you do it in very short bursts. We'll take our wheel, line it up, take our lug nuts, start them by hand a few turns. And we'll take our impact and go in an alternating star pattern to provide even torque. And we'll do the same on the other side. With our lug nuts snugged up, we can torque them to the manufacturer's specification, which I believe on this particular vehicle is between 140 and 150 foot-pounds. But first we need to lower the wheels so they're barely touching the ground. With all 6 lug nuts torqued, we can reinstall our center cap. And these are plastic, so you don't need to go very tight on them at all, otherwise they'll crack. With all 6 of the plastic lug nut caps snugged down, we can repeat the process on the other side. Now we can lower our vehicle completely. And that completes our installation of the Firestone Sport-Rite air helper springs for the rear axle, part number F2320 on our 2007 GMC Sierra 1500.
Click the link below to shop, learn more, or visit us at etrailer.com.